We're going to get going in a few minutes. So thank you for all of those people who are participating from all over the place. You can see in front of us the amazing panelists that we've got today. We'll be introducing them all in a few minutes. It's now about 12:29. We're probably going to wait for another 3 minutes perhaps. But wow, this number's just racking up. We've got over 50 people in here now. So I'm starting to get nervous. And but it's going to be a lot of fun today. As I said, we've got some really amazing speakers. What I will ask people as they come in, just to demonstrate a couple of things, I'll say this a couple of times a little bit later on as well, but just if you're coming in, start to practice and learn how to do some things. Make sure that you find where the chat button is and just click on that chat down at the bottom of your screen on Zoom. Click on that chat thing, make sure it's open, and just type a message to everyone there. Just type something that says, hello, how you doing, or whatever it is. Oh, there's Angela Wu saying hi, fantastic. We've got Constance Chow. I know Constance, she's on my board. Hi, Constance. We've got Kendall, Catherine, Molly Marge is in, Angela Wu, great. Greg Huang, Ikuko Saito, Helen Starr, wow. Helen, Sonia Paps, fantastic, good to see you, Sonia. Sarah's here, the CEO from Japan. Lauren Petit, wow. A lot of people from Shanghai coming through. We've got Tokyo, Japan. There's somebody from Beijing, somebody from Taiwan. Wow. Hi, it's Hong Ting. Wow. Ariel Chen from Taiwan. She's also on the Women in Business committee here. That's great. Vivian Wei from Shanghai. That's great. Sunny Sun from Tokyo. If I missed anybody throughout there, I apologize. There were a lot of names coming through. We've got about almost 60 people online right now. So, oh, hello, Kim Fisher. How are you? Kim Fisher from Beijing. So we're going to kick off. What I'm going to do is just kind of take you through a couple of the kind of processes for the day. Really great to have you all here. I'm going to share my screen with all of you now. So you'll be seeing a very short presentation on kind of what we're doing today, what we hope to achieve, and where everybody's from. So if you'll just bear with me. Now, one thing I do want to say, this is the first time we've done this. So there may be some things that don't work out 100%, but just bear with us, we'll get it right. It's going to be great. It's going to be a good day. We'll be here for an hour and it's going to fly past. I can just feel it now. So I'm going to share my screen with all of you. So it's strange with a webinar because you can't really see people when you're doing this sort of stuff, but I'm just going to assume that you're all there. This is let's talk about mentorship. It's a Women in Business seminar. The great thing about what we're doing today is it's the combination of 5 different chambers around the region. So we've got the British Chamber of Commerce in Japan, British Chamber of Commerce in Shanghai. We've got the British Chamber of Commerce in China, based in Beijing there. And we've got the British Chamber of Commerce in Singapore, and us here hosting it today, the British Chamber of Commerce in Taipei. So I look forward to having a fun hour with all of you. Now, if I just move on, our speakers today, we've got some amazing people. We're very lucky to have everyone here. The head of the Women in Business Committee here in Taipei, Revital Shpangental, who's also the founder of Anemone Ventures, sorry. We've got Kirsten O'Connor, who runs Quest Tokyo, and she'll be talking to us a little bit later on about goal setting, as well as some stuff on leadership. We've got Agatha Lee from Cathay Pacific. She's the head of Greater China for Cathay Pacific. Thoroughly nice person, and she's going to be sharing some stuff later on as well. Rosie Hawes from Control Risks. She's a partner at Control Risks. And we've got the founder of Hopscotch, which is an organization which supports the development of women and business around the globe, actually. And that's Helen McGuire. So we're going to have a good day. They're the people that are going to be talking to you a bit later on. Now, here are the subjects and the different people that are going to be talking about those subjects. I'm not going to leave this up there for too long. It was on the website, so you've all seen this. But I will let you know what we will be doing. We'll have a speaker speaking about each of the areas for about 5 minutes. Then we'll have probably 3 minutes or so of Q&A on that topic. And then we'll have a short poll or 2 about that, and then we'll need to move on. We've got a lot to get through, so it's going to take us, we're going to have to be really, really controlled on our time today. For us in Taipei, we really have to thank Robert Walters and Aberdeen Standard Investments, who have been very supportive for us on the Women in Business program and the mentoring program that we've put together here. So without them, we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing. So I just wanted to put in a little shout out for them as well. Thank you very much to both of them. And I think they're both on the call as well. We have, okay, we have some people who have raised their hands already. That's great. I just want to go through a couple of Zoom basics before we get to any questions or any kind of hand raising. Just want to let you know, all of you who are attendees, you're all on mute. We won't be able today go through, have people talking live, but we do have the chat room and we do have, you know, the Q&A. So, and we have a couple of people monitoring that. We've got Tina, Sabrina, and Lawrence are all monitoring those questions. So please do write your questions through the Q&A or the chat directly to them. If something goes wrong today, don't worry, we'll fix it. All right. If you drop out, just log back in, we'll still be here. Attendees, I've seen a few people have raised their hands already, which is great. That means you've got a question. The team here are going to try and write, when you raise your hand, the team, Tina and Sabrina, will be writing directly to you to ask you what it is that you need so that we can help you fix that. It may be a technical issue or it may just be a question about what's going on. All the speakers today are panelists, and you'll be able to see the speakers on screen at this time. They will be able to see the Q&A directly and will be able to answer your questions directly via text as they go through, or we will try and put those questions into the panel as we go through. Now, we've got a lot of people online, not much time, so we won't be able to get through all of the questions today. But we will do our very best to get through as many as we can. And if we can't, we're going to list them and we'll do some follow-up afterwards. As well as we said, we're going to be recording the event. So we will be trying to make that available to the people that have been on the call as well. If you really don't want to be recorded for whatever reason, I'm not sure why that would be, but if there is a reason, then you know, let us know, and that's your choice. And you can, I guess, drop out if you really don't want to be recorded. But just to let you know that we are recording the event, and by being here, you are accepting the fact that we're recording that event. So please understand. Thank you. As I said, we'll have a couple of polls between each speaker, about a minute or so. And at the end, if we still have time, we'll do some open Q&A and try and get through the rest of your questions. Okay, so I am done there. I need to shift. I've got Revital Shpangental, who's in the same room as me here. So I'm going to mute myself and open her. I have now unmuted Revital.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's good to have you all here. It's a pleasure to start our first webinar from Taipei. And a dear topic to all of us, leadership in a crisis. During the crisis, we see true leadership and discover true leaders. And some of us are in leadership positions, and some of us took the opportunity to display leadership, and some of us observe dysfunctional leadership. I'll share my experience, and then we can open this to the panel. When we look at handling a crisis, we want to break it down into a process of the response, which I will talk soon, the recovery, the road to recovery and our exit strategy, and the lessons learned, how we become a better organization and better prepared for future crises. It's important, so we're not going to be caught off guard. Let's focus on the response first, and then we can look at what is important for our teams. When we look at the response, we want to look at the four most important things to our team that we need to always be aware of. The physical health, our teams want to make sure that their health is being taken care of, and that is top of the workplace concerns. We also look at the financial health of our employees, and we want to make sure that we reduce any uncertainties, or at least reduce financial insecurity. We want to share our plan and make sure that our staff will be prepared accordingly, although we all understand that we need to face some sort of financial insecurity. And then we look at our emotional health. Compassion makes a difference. The more we talk and communicate to our teams about their families, about the situation, about the events that are being unfold, the better we understand where they are at. And it's also time for us to show flexibility whenever we are dealing with them. It's very important that we also take care of the community and look above and beyond the company and our own industry. Our community is essential for all of our function, whether it's any essential services like hospital, healthcare, educator, senior care. We don't live in a vacuum, and we need to understand what does community needs and how we can look above and beyond. So we really need to look at what really matters to our team and address this in our response. And then I would like to just to move on. See? In terms of leadership and leadership in crisis, and I would like again to share my experience and also later open this to the panel, because whether you are in a position of authority or whether you decide to display any leadership, you have to earn it. We have to earn it. So communication is a key, and we want to be transparent and predictable as possible, as there are enough uncertainties as is. We want to address the now with our response, but at the same time look beyond, above and beyond, to show our exit strategy and a road to recovery. We want to look far and we want to look wide and address it as we go. We want to take actions that matter and that takes us to the road of recovery and to the exit strategy. And we want to make sure that even if those are small milestone, we share progress, we show progress, and small milestones are important as the complete recovery itself. So we want to take the team and show what is the process and what we're doing well, and focus on the positive. And then we are all humans and we do mistakes. It's okay to acknowledge mistakes as long as we show learnings and we share those learnings with the team. And we also later make sure that we clearly understand what we need to do later in order to avoid or be better prepared for future crises. And last one is lead by example. What we do is much more important than what we say. And in crises like we face now, and in many other situations like this, if we all have uncertainties and we all have financial issues, and if our team takes a cut, we need to take a cut, and we need to do more than what we say. So those are some of the things that are important in my opinion and according to my experience, and I would be very happy to open it to the panel so they can share their experience and comments.
Okay, thank you very much, Revital. I really enjoyed that. The time really flies out here. What I seem to have failed to do at the beginning as well, to introduce myself. My name is Stephen Parker, in case anybody wants to know who I am, and I'm the CEO of the British Chamber of Commerce in Taipei. I know when we were talking before this that Kirsten, and I'm just going to unmute you now, you were talking about some of the experiences that you had in Japan in terms of leadership and leading in a crisis. And I wondered maybe you could share some of that with us.
Yes, thank you very much. Nice to meet everybody, and I'm very honoured to be here on this inaugural joint panel event, joint chamber event, so thank you very much. Revital, you mentioned a lot of the elements that in real life experience really are really are important. Some of you know that I'm in Japan, and in 2011 we had a gigantic earthquake, and I was at the time the acting head teacher of the primary school because the head teacher was overseas recruiting, and so I was thrown into the leadership of a school during an enormous earthquake, and it really did teach me a lot of things, some of which are resonating now as we're going through this COVID crisis as well. And Revital, you mentioned communication. That was one of the key elements of the carrying us through that situation, was making sure that we were communicating in many different directions. The connection with the community at that moment was really important. The biggest learning that I had was that very quickly you're making that decision about whether you're doing things fast or whether you're doing them right. And when you're in an immediate crisis, a little bit different to the slow burning crisis that we're watching unravel at the moment, was that you have to step into that kind of commanding leadership situation very, very quickly. And one of the kind of the core things that I found was giving really clear instructions to people, and the people around you expecting you to be able to do that. So despite the fact that your knees are knocking because you're nervous about something, you're still able to smile and give clear instructions, being very honest with what's going on, listening to how people are feeling and feeling that empathy. So smiling was very important, praising was very important, but keeping that community together to make sure that you've got that kind of combined effort. And I found a word that kept resonating was needing to be authentic. Really, nobody knew what was going on. We were all making it up as we went along, in line with our crisis management procedures, but really we were acting on the spur of the moment. And so what you were saying about communication there, I think is really important. And as you say afterwards as well, acknowledging the mistakes, because although you're trying to do everything right, as a human, you do make mistakes, and we did, and we learned from them. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Kirsten. I know that Agatha, and I'm going to unmute you now, bring you back into this. You mentioned something about, you were talking about communications in a crisis. And I think, I mean, you work for a major airline. It's obviously something that's extremely important to an airline, is how to communicate in a crisis.
Yeah, yes. Thank you, Stephen, and nice to meet you all. Good afternoon. Yeah, it's great to join this panel here. Just quickly, just to echo on Revital's and Kirsten's point about communications. In a crisis, it is much more important even than the usual days to communicate. And as and when we're running an organization, stepping into a crisis, we're probably jumping into handling the crisis itself and communicating to those who are directly impacted. And then suddenly and come to realize that there are a lot of people, silent people around, our usual stakeholders. They are actually hungry for information and waiting for it. But our focus would be too much on the immediate crisis that we might be missing those. So I guess it's important for us to take a quick pause early on, mapping out who are the people that we need to make sure that we engage, even if they're not asking you directly or immediately for questions or informations. During a crisis, that part of the communications is important. And in a sense of acknowledging mistakes and all that, with all the crisis, I think is perfectly we would make mistakes, and there are a lot of uncertainties throughout the crisis. We might not be able to communicate very direct things or a complete picture. Just be confident about that. It's okay to acknowledge that there are a lot of uncertainties ahead. And it's also good to people or leaders that they know we're on top of it, trying to address that uncertainty, that it is not something too big that we want to avoid it. Yeah, there are uncertainties in crisis, definitely, and we're on top of it and trying to map it through. It's difficult, but at least we're looking into it. And this is the kind of confidence as during a crisis, it's important to communicate to our people, our stakeholders, our customers, likewise.
Wonderful. Yeah, Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that. I want to come across to Rosie just for a quick second, if I may. And I'm going to unmute you, Rosie. I mean, it's really in the name of your company, Control Risks. I mean, this is kind of what you do. We had a question that actually came in from Takayuki Sugata in Japan, who was asking about how to be transparent in a crisis. And I wondered whether that was something that you might be able to address for us. And the other thing you talked a little bit about was motivating people when the crisis situation is around.
Yeah, so, well, firstly, thank you very much, Stephen, and it's a pleasure to be taking part today. You're right that our company DNA is in crisis. We were founded 40 years ago to help with hostage situations. So there's a lot of stories in the company about how to help companies work through those kinds of really intense situations. And I think what we have to remember is, you know, a crisis can be a huge event like COVID, like the earthquake that Kirsten mentioned, or it can be something very specific to the company and that can just affect a few individual stakeholders. But the question about transparency is a really interesting one, because there are multiple stakeholders involved, and each will have their own motivations, their own emotions, their own thoughts and opinions. And those can often be very, very conflicting, or because it's a crisis situation, emotions are heightened. And so I think just tying together what everybody said here, communication, and also recognizing those stakeholders, but really focusing on what the ultimate goal is, whether it's recovery, whether it's focusing on just resolving one specific thing before you can move to the next thing, is most important. And then if everybody understands what you're aiming towards, they can get and jump on board that ship, and hopefully you can reach that together. Otherwise, you find that you have multiple competing agendas, and it can be very difficult to resolve. In terms, you mentioned emotion. I think now is the perfect example. We have to remember everybody's on their own journey, has their own experiences and pressures right now. And it could be family, it could be work stress, it could be anything. But just I'm very conscious that people are responding more emotionally right now, or more aggressively, or with more irritation. And just, it's hard, but try not to take that personally, and recognizing that everyone is under a very unusual and extreme amount of pressure, and it's nothing to do with you. And I think, again, that helps you move forwards.
I think you brought up a very interesting point, I think, Rosie, about the, and I'm just going to cut you off on that. I'm sorry about that. But you brought up an interesting point. You talked about goals, being aware of the goals. And that moves us very nicely into what Kirsten is about to talk about now, about how to, and we are talking about mentoring today specifically. So how to set goals and how to deal with those goals. Maybe Kirsten, I'll come back to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I should set the scene briefly by introducing myself as an educator. I'm the founder and director of Quest Tokyo, which is a company that aims to meet the educational needs of the Japanese and international community here in Tokyo. Prior to that, I was the head teacher at the British school, and I was there for 17 years, not as the head teacher, but for most of it. And the experience that I've had over that time is working in both countries and in both settings as a teacher and a leader, involved with mentoring newly qualified teachers, aspiring middle leaders, aspiring senior leaders. And what I want to do today is just to share some of the experiences, and hopefully you can take some of that away with you today. We're talking about setting goals and objectives while still having fun, and I do want to have some emphasis on that final section, because I think we all know what goals are, we all know what objectives are. I don't think there's any need for me to clarify that. We've all heard of SMART targets, those that are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-bonded targets. We know all that, but to maintain and engender some sort of enjoyment from the process of setting targets, which we are all smothered in whichever realm of work we are in, I think that there are I have found four key sort of resonating factors that have helped me to find some enjoyment in that process. I think the first thing is that when you're working with a mentee, to set targets and objectives is establishing a relationship. I think that kind of goes without saying, but I think if you delve a bit deeper into the fact that you need to have a very shared vision for the focus of development, so a clarity between the mentor and the mentee for what the end game is. So looking at where are we going with this, why are we doing this. I think it's also important when you're establishing that relationship to agree the shared values that you've got between you, and I think that's a very important platform from which to start. I always look for if I'm mentoring a person, I'm looking for somebody who's got the same level of integrity and open-mindedness. There's a level of reliability, there's a consistency in respect, and a consistency generally in the way that they're approaching things, so that there's a mutual movement forward towards the goals that we're setting. And I think even between the two of you and in the conversation, that you develop a culture of openness and of honesty, and that there's, if you can manage that, then there's the ability on both sides to admit when mistakes are made, agreeing where shared learning has occurred, and you can use that expression of failing forward. So you know, we all muck things up, which is absolutely fine, and that's the way we learn, but failing forward so that you don't make that mistake again. And of course, that enormously important aspect of humour. You need to find a way to engender humour in that relationship. Secondly, I think it's important as a mentor to bring authenticity to that relationship, being able to share real life experiences, but also real clarity into insights, into industry skills and industry practice, which is often difficult to get into when you're early in your career. And so I think that authenticity is very important. I think the word invest is really important in many different areas. And what I would talk about here is committing the time, or investing the time in the goals that you're setting. So knowing that you've got realistic timeframes for what you're expecting to be done. And also being realistic in the time you can commit to it, because I think everybody, you know, everybody has a frantic life pace, regardless of whether we're working at home or not now. Life is still high pace, so making sure that we commit the time that we can truly give. But also I think it's important to be realistic about the time it takes to actually establish change. You may know about a report, a piece of research that was done by Dr. Robert Coe at Durham University. He did some research about teacher development, teacher professional development, and they uncovered that it takes 30 hours of input to actually leverage some change in teaching practice. And I expect that we can extrapolate that out to other industries as well. We did our own research into that and changed the way that we did one big area of development in the school, and we found it profoundly changed the way that we could leverage change and set our goals if our teachers had as a minimum 30 hours of training in an area. So that's an interesting piece of research that I can try and dig out and share with you. And finally, the fourth point is empowering. I think as mentors, it's important that we enable mentees to bring their own passion and harness it with them, help them harness that passion. I've talked a little bit recently about reverse mentoring, which I've always been a big fan of. As a head teacher, when I did recruitment, I was always very invested in making sure that I recruited teachers who were much better than me. Either had better quality schools they were coming from, or were much more up to date in what they were doing. I've been in Japan for a very long time, so I used it as an opportunity for me to develop as well. So whereas I would be mentoring young teachers, they would be teaching me and thereby helping me develop the school. So it's useful to take on mentees who can teach us. I think it enables us to nourish our own careers as well. And also considering the kind of millennial experience, which is sometimes a challenge in workplaces, but understanding how the world is seen differently, how we can bring the expectations of the workplace and how new views of the future can be incorporated into companies can really be helpful. So I think when you hear the expression setting goals and objectives, there is obviously an emotional reaction to it. Some might feel excited, some might feel optimistic, others of us might feel anxiety or even irritation being asked to set targets. But I think if we can find a way as mentors and as mentees of being authentic, of investing good quality time, of empowering each other while nurturing that learning relationship, I think we can actually set targets and still have fun while we're doing it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kirsten. There's a lot of good insights there. There's a couple of questions that came up while you were talking, and I'm going to Helen's been a little bit quiet for a while, so I might bring Helen into this one if I may. Helen, and I'm just muting you out now, Kirsten, I apologize. One of the questions that came up while we were talking about this, and I know this is something that is kind of, that is something that you are very interested in, is what to do with the mentors and mentees. We talk about goal setting, but what if the mentors and mentees can't agree? If they don't share the values, and if they can't agree on the goals, how can these two people work together?
I think what's really key, and Kirsten, I think, highlighted this in her point, is when you're looking to be either a mentor or a mentee, it's really about finding that commonality. Chemistry is super important where mentorship is concerned. You really probably shouldn't start on a mentorship journey if you can't initially agree on what those goals are in the first place. That would probably be my point on that. I think what's really key is to do your background and do your research. I mean, you know, in my little bit that I'm going to talk about, you know, it's about finding the right person. And that could be somebody from a friendship network. It could be an ex-colleague. It could even be an ex-boss. But equally, it could be somebody who, you know, a friend of a friend, or somebody on LinkedIn that you might find. And I think there are some key questions that you need to ask each other before you start in that relationship. It's a little bit like dating somebody. You know, you have to sort of have that trust initially. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to open up. You're not going to be able to get the most out of it, either from a mentor or a mentee perspective. So I would say if you can't agree on initial goals, then perhaps, you know, look for another mentor. That would be my best advice there.
Okay, yeah, good advice. If it doesn't work out, move on, right? So I'm going to put you back on mute now, if I may. We're going to pop into our first poll section now. We've got 3 quick polls we'd like you to do. These are courtesy of Kirsten, has given us some ideas for these ones. Please just take about 30 seconds. We want a snapshot of what you feel about these different things. So I'm just going to bring up the polling section here. Goal setting, launch. So this is about the goal setting, right? When you, and the panelists can take part in this as well. We've opened it up to you as well, so feel free to vote. So we've got some people voting already. When you think about goal setting, what is the first emotion that you feel? We've got a lot of people, wow, we've got a lot of people voting now. We'll give it about 30 seconds only. We've got so many people here. We've got over half the people have already voted. That's fantastic. We're gonna have some good, we're gonna write a book using all of these polls that we produced today. We've got a couple more seconds for this one. We've still got people polling. We're slowing down now. I'm going to give it, oh, almost everybody's voted. Come on, last couple. If we can get you in there. I'm going to end the poll in about 2, 3, 4 seconds. All right, I'm going to share the results very quickly with you now. So when you think about goal setting, was the first emotion you feel? Most people were excited. That's good, I think, Kirsten. Excited, optimistic. Less people felt annoyed, less people felt anxious. So I think we may well be talking to the already converted here, but I think that's a good result for us. We're going to launch another poll about goal setting. So we'll give you another 30 seconds on this one. And this, sorry, that's the same one. Apologies. Review your goals. So how often, on average, how often do you think you should review your goals, or do you review your goals? And again, we'll give people about 30 seconds to vote on this one. People are getting much better at it now. They're all in there. They're all super quick. All right, we probably only need another 5 seconds on this one. Almost everybody's done it. 83% of people have already gone through. So I'm going to close it out and I'll share it all with you, share the results. This is interesting. Most people talk about monthly. We run our program here and we talk about having people at least get together once a month. We feel like this is one of the things, especially with people with busy lives. So it feels like the audience kind of agrees with us here. I'm going to do one more quick poll on the most challenging part of mentoring. What aspect of goal setting do you find the most challenging? So again, we're looking forward to, we'll give you about 30 seconds. Don't think, just feel, just respond. All right. Again, we've got a fantastic audience. I really wish I could see you all because you're obviously very, very keen bunch of people, very involved, very motivated to get involved. So it's great. And as we finish up this one, we're going to be moving, in a moment, we're going to be moving through to Agatha, who's going to be talking to us about feedback, about how to give feedback. And again, our time is running away from us a little bit, so we'll need to keep that in mind as we go through. All right, I'm going to finish this one up now. What aspect of goal setting? Maintaining motivation. I guess it's something that we all have a problem with, whether it's exercise or whether it's mentoring, whether it's whatever program we get involved with. So that was I guess for me, it's probably not a surprise. Sharing the results with you now. Maintaining motivation was the biggest response, over a third of the people. Interesting. Okay. We're going to keep moving on. So I'm going to shut the polling down, and I'm going to unmute you, Agatha, and we're going to listen to you talk a little bit about how to give people feedback.
Yeah. Hello all again. So quickly introduce myself. I work in Cathay Pacific, the airline group, and has been a career with the company for close to 20 years. I do have a lot of experience in being a mentee as well being a mentor. So get a lot of benefit from the mentorship program myself. So I think it's good occasion and honored to be able to share a bit about feedback. Giving feedback is something that many of us do all the time, and probably under different contexts. Between mentor and mentees, the first thing I would suggest actually is to echo Kirsten's comment on time commitment. Feedback sessions, schedule it regularly and well ahead, and making time for it rather than, oh, it comes a quarter, it's time to catch up. Let's see whether we can find an hour this Friday or something. Get something to look forward to. I think it helps set the scene for the conversation. In terms of setting the scene, and is similar to other occasions when we're giving feedback, environmental factor is also important. Find a quiet place and make sure your phone is off during the session as well. Yeah. And another suggestion in the context on giving feedback to mentees is to let them drive the conversations. It goes back to the purpose of mentorship arrangement in the first place. Most of the time it's about the mentees' development, of them moving forward in their careers. The role of the mentor would be to support that initiatives, offering advice and sharing experiences along the way. So it centers around the mentee's own intention and drive. Be it their strengths or their areas of weakness, the genuine interest and passion of the mentee will magnify the result. Of course, I'm not saying that like we should just turn a blind eye on an obvious area of weakness, simply because the mentee is not interested in that area. We certainly want to bring it up, but then like let them think through it, and then we'll motivate them to address the area, and is get a buy-in on that one before we're offering a lot of advice on how to address that. Yeah, and as mentors, sometimes we're so excited about sharing our experience. Yes, mentees do want to hear our experience and stories. They want to be inspired, simply. And it's good to do so in a mentee-mentee relationship, build the trust and bonding. Just be mindful that we don't shift the focus of the feedback session into a sharing of success stories of the mentor ourselves. Yeah. And another thing is about like listening. It is always a two-way dialogue. Listening is as important as what we speak ourselves. As mentors, we also want to develop, as Kirsten's also mentioned, with reverse mentoring. I think it's good to get feedback from the mentee along the way as we're giving feedback ourselves as well. Yeah, these are two sessions that we use together. A knowledge strength, it is like as in other feedback occasions other than mentorship, it's important. Positive reinforcement will keep the momentum going on and energize the conversation, building the trust and bonding as well. And again, similar to other occasions on giving feedback, we want it to be specific and actionable, like much mirroring the goals in terms of being smart. One thing here though is about being direct. I think like here in Asia, culturally we tend to be milder giving feedback in general, and that behavior maybe even more so in the context with mentees, as sometimes they're not exactly our subordinates. Yeah, so to keep that in mind about like being direct, to make sure that the point actually resonates. One final point I want to make before moving on to a wider discussion is on the effective use of pauses. And a lot of conversation it is, and we talk about this very often. Easier said than done. In a feedback section, I think some pauses and silence is very useful as well. It allows both the mentee and the mentor to reflect on what we have been discussing, what plans on actions, what the next step can go on and lead on to. So that brings to a more meaningful mentor-mentee relationship, I think, in the long run. So with that, let me just pass back to Stephen. Thanks.
I'm unmuted now. My apologies. I've unmuted myself. Thank you very much, Agatha. That was really interesting. There's a couple of points you brought up, which I thought were great. It's about the mentee, right? It's about the mentee. Sometimes as mentors, we talk and we make it about ourselves. But it also goes both ways, as Kirsten says. But this idea of being very direct as well, I thought that was really great. There was a question that came up while you were speaking, and I'm going to pass this over to Revital, but just wait for a moment. I'll just give you the question, Revital. I know that you and I have been through this process of how to match up mentors and mentees. We've got we do a process here that we go through every year to match up our mentoring and menteeing program. I just wondered if you had some insights on how to go about finding the right match for the different mentors.
Well, as we experience, it takes a lot of thought, and sometimes we need to do the research. Like Helen said, we need to do the research before, and it's like dating almost. So we need to look at a lot of the backgrounds and also try to figure out the goals. And then the match was not always good, Steve, but we were open for comments in terms of like what can we do better. So I think we try to look at what are the main points that can connect between the mentors and the mentees, and what could they share, and how can they build a two-way dialogue. Like Agatha said, a two-way dialogue is very important, and what Kirsten said, which is, I think it's beautiful, it's the reverse mentoring. How can both benefit from the relationship and can further build themselves throughout the process. So we try to do our best, and just looking at those main topics as guidelines.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm unmuted now. I was just having a quick look. We've got a couple of questions coming in, which I'm going to put through at the end, for we have another section there. Thanks, Revital. I know we went through a very long process with how to match everybody up, and it takes a lot of effort. But in the end, I think with the the 60 people that we had in our program, we managed to find good companions for everybody to get some real value out of it. I'm going to move over to Rosie again. I'm unmuting you now. Rosie, welcome back. One of the things that people are very concerned about with mentoring and mentee is the outcomes. And I just wondered whether you had some insights on what people should be looking at for the, it's a little bit different to goals, right? Goals is what you set, but the outcomes is how do you know? How do you know when you graduate? How do you know what you get, what you want? How do all those, so I'm going to leave that for you to have share some of your insights on outcomes.
Yep, thanks again for that. I've already briefly introduced my day job, but I'm also the chair of the British Chamber in Shanghai and an active member of the Women in Business committee there. And one thing they're involved in, which some of you may also be aware of, is the mentor walks. So these are held every month. Mentees sign up. Again, it's a bit like speed dating. There's a list of mentors and their experience and their skill set, and then you split into small groups and go for a walk. And when I first arrived in China about 5 years ago, I participated as a mentee, and more recently I've participated as a mentor. And in both occasions, I found it incredibly useful. So if any of you have the opportunity to participate in your own towns, I'd really encourage you to do so. And that is a good example as well of a very short experience. So the mentee will come with a specific issue they want to discuss, and then you almost discuss it in a group. And so the outcome there is very much limited to that very brief conversation between a small group of individuals. But what I found fascinating was when I was a mentor, the person who I spoke to actually reached out to me 3 months later to tell me that she'd applied what I'd suggested and it had worked, which was really satisfying. But even that small, 45-minute conversation can still have an impact. So what I wanted to talk about briefly actually is taking it back to what is mentoring. So to understand the outcome, mentoring is not coaching. So coaching is obviously technical skills, really focusing on hard skills, whereas mentoring is much more of a dialogue. And so deciding at what point in your career you want to do this is important. You can do it at any time in your career. Like I said, I've done it, and I would still love a mentor as well. So the decision and the thought process you go through about what are the circumstances right now which mean that I could benefit from those broader conversations. And then, as we've all been talking, they can be very time focused. So it might be that you've just got a specific issue that you just really need external perspective, and a few discussions will suffice. Otherwise, it might be something much longer term. When we're talking about outcomes, again, I liked also the concept of a reverse mentorship. So the outcome for the mentor and the outcome for the mentee are two different things. So it's worth considering that the mentor is sharing their time and getting involved for a specific reason too, and that's to help and bring experience and to help colleagues to advance. But they will also benefit, whereas the mentee is there to learn. And so the key for both of those is honesty and transparency. And I've certainly found personally that it's much easier to hear a hard message from somebody who is not your boss or your direct colleague than it is otherwise. So actually, honesty is essential to lead to the right outcomes. The concept of outcome is actually really quite tricky to define though. So my experience and my suggestion would be working through the key issues that you're concerned about, pick real life situations, real life scenarios, and use those to form the conversation. Personally, I found it most helpful when I could say, X and Y and Z are going to happen. This is how I think I should approach it. What do you think? And then talking through the different scenarios and revisiting it subsequently to see how it went. And that way, actually, personally, it really helped enforce my confidence in my own judgment and my own abilities. And when I've gone through this process, that's what's helped me the most.
And I'm just unmuting myself. Thank you so much, Rosie. I think, a couple of things. The honesty, I think, is really important. That's a really great point. Thank you very much. And those real life examples. If you want outcomes, you've really got to be looking at what it is that you really want to achieve. I think that's a great thing. We're going to move on in a moment onto Helen. But just before we do, we're going to do another quick poll, if that's okay. So I'm muting you now, Rosie. Apologies. And we'll do another quick poll. This one, basically, very, very quick one, is what makes a good mentor? What makes a good mentor? Let me just, what have I done? Excuse me. I told you there'd be some mistakes and I've made some. So what makes a good mentor? I'm going to launch this poll now. So everyone out there, let me know what you think makes a good mentor. And again, we'll give you about 30 seconds. All right, we've got just about everybody has answered. I'm going to close it off in about 2 seconds. So, all righty. So, okay, I think this is probably, I'm going to share the results with you all. Got to remember to click that button. Good listener. I think that's something that's come up time and time again from each of the people today, is you've got to be able to listen. That's a super important thing. And experience. So you want people to have some real life experience and background and stuff like that. So interesting thoughts. Okay, I'm going to move on to now. I can see Helen's preparing. So Helen, I'm going to unmute you. And one of the interesting things, and maybe you can just kind of throw that into your mix, as we had a question as well that came up, is the difference between mentorship and sponsorship. If that's something you can address as you go through. But also, I know you're going to talk to us really about mentors, how to find them, how to become one, and share some of your learnings So passing it over to you, Helen.
Thank you, Stephen, and hi everybody. Thank you very much to everyone who's spoken so far. I think you've all touched on elements probably of what I'm going to say as well. Just to briefly introduce myself, my name's Helen McGuire. I'm the founder of a women's careers platform called hopscotch.work, and we help businesses to find women who are looking to re-enter the workforce through placing them in 3-month placements, and you know, we've also through that had lots of experience with mentorship previously. So one of the programs that we ran was actually with MasterCard, and it was specifically helping women who, you know, were struggling to find a job in a new environment. Perhaps they'd fallen off the career ladder for family reasons or because they'd moved, and they wanted some advice. So we selected women from our community and matched them with women internally at MasterCard on a 6-month program. So I've had lots of experience around this area, being both a mentor and a mentee myself. And I think the key difference, just to answer your question before I start, Stephen, between mentorship and sponsorship is that mentorship is essentially when you're in a room with somebody and you're talking to them and giving them direct advice and feedback and so on. Sponsorship is when you're talking about somebody who's not in the same room as you. So it could be, you know, your boss could be your sponsor, your partner could be your sponsor, but it's somebody who introduces you as a useful person to their network in any context. So I wanted to go through 3 specific points where mentorship is concerned. I think now is an amazing time to reach out either to be a mentee or a mentor. During these times, people have a little bit more time on their hands, perhaps, depending on what job you do. I'm currently working from home, so if you see a few kids running around, you have to just excuse that. But, you know, I do have a bit more time in my day, and I think it's a great time to reach out, particularly given, you know, emotions are quite high at the moment, and I think people are much more open to helping and to talking to other people as well. I think the first thing you need to do when you're thinking about going on a mentorship journey is to clarify your purpose. So do you want to be a mentor or a mentee? Both have very, you know, amazing benefits, as I think everybody's touched on. There is a symbiotic relationship between the two. It's not the case that the mentee gets all the help and the mentor doesn't. The mentor can equally learn as much from the mentee. I think values are incredibly important to establish from the beginning. So you could even go through a kind of value tree, each highlight your key values, and if they are wildly different, then I would recommend perhaps not getting into that dating relationship or that mentorship with that person. But if you have some values in common, you have areas of interest in common, and you feel that that person can genuinely help you to move forward, then, you know, it's good to get on the ladder and move to the next stage. In terms of finding a mentor in the first place, or perhaps even finding mentees, I touched a little bit on how to do this right at the beginning, but I guess there are 3 different pools I would generally fish from. So first of all, friends and colleagues, specifically people that you know and you trust, perhaps that have relevant experience or that you've worked with previously. It's probably not ideal to have a mentor as somebody that you work with directly. I think that could get a little bit tricky, but certainly, you know, fish from that pool first, I would say, if anybody comes to mind. Secondly, a wider network. So I would say something like LinkedIn is really useful where this is concerned, or certainly, you know, colleagues of colleagues, friends of friends. Put something up, you know, ask a question. Don't be shy about the fact that you're looking to be mentored or you're looking for a mentee. People are generally really open to help. So I think just firing somebody a message on LinkedIn, can I grab you for a coffee to get your experience on X, is generally received really, really well. So it's worth reaching out even to people that you don't know. And thirdly, I think through organisations. So obviously British Chambers is a great source of that, but also there's an organisation here in Singapore, for example, that I know about called Protégé, which is run by a lady called Louise, and she matches up mentees to mentors within organisations. So do a bit of Googling, you know, there's Lean In and all sorts of other women's networks you can get involved in. and I'm sure that will, that will help you on your path as well, and help things come up. Lastly, I think, a lot of the speakers have touched on this previously, but in terms of how do you go through this journey? And I would say, yes, goal setting is very important. Outcomes are very important. In this specific time, meeting remotely is, just as good as meeting in person in many respects. So don't think that you can't do it just because you're not in the same city, or you're not, down the road, and you can meet every week or every month for a coffee, but just make sure that those guidelines are established in the first place. So how often are you meeting? What do you want to get out of that meeting? And where do you want to get to in what time frame? So I think it's worth putting some effort in right at the beginning, because otherwise you could kind of meet up and just, shoot the breeze with that person and never really get anywhere. And I think that's a real danger where mentorship is concerned. So yes, being open, being honest, and being very clear about what you want to get out of it is also very important. And I think that probably wraps up my key points on mentorship.
Wow. Here we are. No, I'm still open. Okay, good. I'm just going to mute you for a moment, Helen. I might bring you back in a second, but we've got a few questions which we want to try and get through if we can. I'm going to throw these out to you randomly, so please just be prepared to answer. We're in. Okay. I'm going to put everybody up here. Is that what you? I've been told I've got to put into gallery view, so we've got everybody up there. We've got a few questions. So I'm going to chuck one out here. The question that we've come in here is, does a mentor, and I think you partly answered this one, Helen, so I'll throw it back to you, but does the mentor have to be from the same organization or same industry that you work for?
No, I definitely not. I mean, it kind of depends, I suppose, on what you're looking to get out of it. But I would say one of the key things about finding a good mentor is that they also have a network. So they also have connections that they can introduce you to. One person is not going to know all the answers to every single question that you have. But having somebody with experience, I think that came up in the poll, is really key. So that they have, these networks that they can tap into and introduce you to as well. So it's definitely not the case that they need to be in your industry, or definitely not in your organization. I would say go a lot broader than that.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. I think they got a lot of that. I'm putting this back into speaker view because there we go. I'm muting you again, Helen. I've taken you back out. I've got a question. I'm going to throw this question back to Kirsten, if I may. What do you do if you have an issue or challenge that you as a mentor can't solve? How do you deal with that with your mentee?
Thanks, Stephen. I think those kind of situations are always difficult. But I think when you know your network, and that's the advantage of the experience of being either in the industry or in different industry, you can always look for other people. We've all got a network, and somebody else will know how to solve a problem. So I think you just have to use your networks and know that none of us know all the answers. I think it's really important that we go into these kinds of mentoring situations knowing that from both sides, but we've always got a network of people that we can call on to get advice and support.
Okay. Thank you. I think it's a good answer. Revital, I've got one more. We've only got a couple of minutes left now, but I want to get through a couple of these questions if we could. The question I've got from one of our audience members is about multiple mentors. When someone has a number of different mentors, would you advise someone working with multiple mentors and/or multiple mentees? I know in our program here in Taipei, we've got some people working with 2 or 3 different mentees at the same time. But what about multiple mentors?
I think that the best thing that one can do is go to multiple opinions and then develop their own line and their own opinion. I think it's fine as long as they have a clear path of what they want to do. It's good to hear other opinions. I always seek for many opinions and then based on that develop my own. So I think it's great.
Okay, fantastic. I agree with. I'm still on mute. Sorry. I was still on mute there. We're almost there, and I'm going to get to the hang of this technology in a second. The one more question. I'm just having a quick look through the Q&A here. We've done that one. Oh, now this one, Rosie, maybe I'll throw this back to you, because we had someone asking, you seem to have a lot of experience with both finding mentees and mentors. The question was, what is a strategy to get someone to agree to be your mentor?
Oh, that's a good question. You should actually recognize that when somebody is impressive and experienced senior business executive, many people will have their eye on them as a mentor. And so thinking realistically about who has the time available to help is important. So you might think, you know somebody very, very senior with 30 years of experience who can really help you, but they're not going to be able to spare the time. And it's much better perhaps to say to them, I'd love to talk more to you, but I recognize you're not going to be available, but perhaps you have a colleague or somebody who could help, and they could sort of introduce you instead. So it can be quite tempting to go for what looks like the best, but they just may not be available. It doesn't mean the person they're identifying as the second best, but it does mean that they will, if they know you and they know their colleagues, that they can help create the best match. So think about who is not just based on seniority, but also can really help you specifically and focus on you.
I'm going to go through, we have two more very quick questions that I want to go through. Helen, I'm going to throw this one to you. You seem to have had a bit of experience in this area. You keep talking about dating. So the question is basically, how do you build up this? A lot of mentor and mentee programs use kind of speed dating processes to help people choose. How do you get through that process and understand in 30 seconds, a minute, or whatever it is, that this is the person that you want to work with, that you share values, etc.?
Can I unmute myself? Yes, there we go. Yeah, so I think the funny thing about chemistry, and if you apply this to your own lives, perhaps, and own experience, chemistry is immediate. It's something that you sense very, very quickly from a person. You can make a decision, rightly or wrongly, about somebody within the first 30 seconds or minute of meeting them. First impressions last, all of that stuff. So whilst you won't know immediately whether that person is definitely going to be the person that you can work with for the next 6 months of your life, you will probably get a sense that they're not. You might just not gel well with that person. So I would say you're not going to get a definite answer in terms of, yes, I want to date, marry, live with this person for the rest of my life from a mentorship perspective. But you'll certainly get a sense of, this is just not going to work, and I think it's that gut feeling really that you have to go with initially, and then perhaps you set up a coffee and you go through some of the value trees and understanding what's important to them, what's important to you, whether they have the right experience and the right background, and you go from there. So I think you can probably get to a good point if you go through the speed dating process, but no, it's not going to answer your question for the next 6 months probably.
Right. Understood. You do your best. And then if it's not working out, you stop dating them, right? Okay, thanks, Helen. I'm going to move across to Agatha for a quick question. Agatha, there was one question we had here, which is basically asking, let me just have a quick look. Is mentor and mentee, is it only for high-level people who have been working for a while, or can someone who is a recent graduate or even in high school, can they use mentorship?
I think like at different points in life, at different time frames, you would look for some role model to share experiences, and like even fresh graduates or like even those who are still in school, it would be good to hear from someone with sometimes more recent experience as well. So I like the chemistry issues is like at which point in time, what is your purpose and target on looking for a mentorship? Yeah. Like if you're graduating, you probably might not be exactly looking for someone with 30, 40 years of experience in a particular technical area to be your mentor. But it would be good to have someone that are closer with more experience and more synergy to share with you what works well in the life as well. So I think it really depends on your purpose. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We've got one last question, and I'm going to bring this one to Revital. This question is about, we've touched on this a little bit today, but this last question is about people from very different backgrounds, but can they also work together?
Actually, I believe that diversity is important, and different backgrounds. If the fact that they come from different circles, from different workplace, from different sectors, from different seniority, from different roles, from different background, is good. It gives us fresh ideas and fresh insights and a different lens of what we do now. So the diversity is good, and I believe that it helps us get a different angle of the problems that we are dealing now in a more innovative way.
Fantastic. Sorry, I'm popping you on mute so I can be unmuted. We are completely out of time. I've learned enormous amounts. I've been writing notes. You've seen my head keep going down as I keep writing notes all the time about what's been going on today. It's been amazing for me. So even if nobody else got anything, I've learned a lot, which is great. Selfish much? A little bit. What I do want to just maybe pop round everyone in the group now, and just if you have kind of like, your last kind of like, mentor and mentee, single most important thing, or it could be like your most creative relationship, in the age of the COVID virus or whatever. Just give us your final leaving statement. No pressure at all, but just what is your kind of last takeaway that you want everyone to leave with today? And I'm just going to do it from the top and start with Revital, if I may, and then I'll go around the rest of the group.
Steve, like you, I learned a lot in this session, and several things that will echo with me, and I will take from this session is be authentic, be predictable, show compassion, and be confident in a positive outcome. That's what we all need these times. And I really thank you for sharing those ideas, and I learned a lot. So thank you for the opportunity, Steve.
Thanks, Revital. Really appreciate it. Kirsten, I'm going to go to you. One last.
Top of my list was authentic as well. I think that's so important, resonates right the way across. I would say being able to be honest and be able to reflect, to be able to fail and make mistakes and learn from it would be my advice. Nice.
You wouldn't be English by any chance, would you?
Completely English, yeah.
Yeah. Love your mistakes. Thanks. Agatha, I'm going to come to you. One last word.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you all for your time. I actually learned a lot from our other panelists as well. One thing I would take away and keep resonating with me is about transparency. Whether it is in a crisis or in a mentor situations, this is an age when transparency makes a lot of sense and engagement with people around as well. So, and it is something, I think, together with authenticity, something that I want to make sure that it resonates and take away with me. Thanks.
Thank you, Agatha. All right, moving around my Brady Bunch screen. It's Rosie.
So apart from saying I agree with everybody else and don't have much more to add, the one other thing that comes to my mind is clarity in communications, especially when you're when it's a couple who are from different cultures, and making sure that the message is really understood and being prepared to accept that message no matter how it is conveyed. You know, the British style might be quite different from the American style, for example, but trying to maintain an open mind.
And as a Scot who was brought up in Australia, I can tell you that cultures do clash.
They do, yes.
I will, Helen, you get the last word here.
Thank you, and thanks to everybody. Yeah, I'm not sure I have a huge amount left to add, but my key takeaway, I guess, would be around vulnerability. I think, you know, now is a great time to reach out in terms of being a mentor or a mentee, and, you know, don't be afraid to say how you're feeling. I think it's authenticity, I think it's trust, I think it's honesty, all of those things. you know, that's the only way you will be able to move forward and move through whatever it is that you're struggling to find the answer to.
Wonderful, thank you. Now, this is the sort of the awkward bit in the webinar where you have to finish at some point and people just have to kind of turn their screens off. But basically what I want to do just before we go, I'm going to get the team to do the best possible photo we can do for everybody that's in the screen right now. So the trick is, for those who are speakers, look directly at your camera for the next 30 seconds and try not to do anything silly. And we'll take a screenshot of this, and this can be our group photo that we otherwise wouldn't be able to do. So 30 seconds, just look at the screen. We're good, apparently. We're all good? Okay, we're good. We're good. We got a great shot. You all look amazing. I want to thank everybody who came today. We had somewhere around 80 people or something that were listening in today, plus the panelists and everybody. So Revital, Kirsten, Agatha, Rosie, Helen, thank you so much. I'm going to just ask you to kind of wave as we finish up the webinar today, and we'll see you all very, very soon. I thought it was a fantastic event. See you guys. Bye-bye.